Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I have with me a very special guest, Beth Deacon. How are you, Beth?
I am awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Guy.
Oh, yeah, another great day in Iowa, let's say. Yeah.
Yes,
So, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? You're the teacher. Yeah.
yes. I've been teaching for approximately 30 years now, and I started my teaching career in the state of Michigan where I grew up. Um, for in 2014, my family moved to Iowa, and before moving to Iowa, I taught adult ed in the evenings for a couple years, and it was just to help out the program because the adult ed program back home did not have a math teacher, and that's what I teach is mathematics. So in doing so, even though I taught public school during the day, every evening from 3:30 to 6, I'd go teach adult ed, and it was one of the most rewarding experiences. I taught people from the ages of 18 to 70. And it was really interesting because I learned quickly that adults go to school because they know what it's like not to have an education.
Mm.
Kids seem to go to school because they're told they have to. There was so much gratitude. And my students worked so hard. I had students that had been addicted to drugs that were trying to turn their lives around. Some came from the jail to go to school, and some just never had an opportunity to get an education and now they wanted one. So it was a really nice experience. So when we moved to Iowa, I thought, what if I took a step away from teaching public education for a few years and worked in corrections or some other adult program? So I started looking for jobs and I found the job at the maximum security prison. And that's where I worked for 3 years. And
So,
it was one of the most rewarding experiences.
yeah, so what were you teaching? What's the profession?
Well, when I taught at the prison, the men were getting their GEDs. So I taught math, writing, and social studies. And then I also had labs where the men would come and learn about science. So it was a new
Wow.
experience for me because for all my
Mm.
life, I taught mathematics my whole career.
Wow. That's great. You seem like a mathematician. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
hope that's a compliment.
I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just an observation. Let's say. Yeah.
I
Okay.
think I'm kind of different when I teach because I'm very laid back. I like to have a lot of discussions in my classroom. Like if you were to walk into my public class, my high school classroom, you'd hear music playing and I'd be singing or dancing with the kids. And sometimes I'll notice the kids having a bad day, so I'll teach from the desk next to them and try to make them feel a little better. I like to sometimes I'll walk in class and just put a chair in the front of the room and say, let's have a discussion about math. So I try to mix it up a lot. And what I did in high school, I did the same thing when I taught adult ed.
Mm.
So it wasn't like when I walked in the prison, I had to change my process. It was pretty much the same teaching methods that I used in high school.
Yeah, because I know from personal experience that my teaching, my teacher, my math teacher had no expectations for me, and I barely got maybe 3 units in math, and then nothing fancier. And he was he was strict uh, the Soviets, Soviet background, shall we say. And he was very strict, but he was a good and hearted person and a lovely conversationalist, let's say. He used to smoke outside, so in the premises of the school, of course, he wouldn't go outside. But so, how do you think that teachers should be a source of inspiration, or they should just uh, gargle up the information and have people gargle it back
I
to
want
them?
when I first started teaching almost 30 years ago, my attitude was I was a teacher and the students didn't have to like me. They just had to come to class and learn from me. My view on education has changed so much. I learned so much over the years. Teaching subject area is, I believe, the easiest part of a teacher's job. Knocking down those walls and building that rapport with the students
Mm.
is what it needs to come first, because once you build that rapport, kids respond to that. And what I mean by that is I want my students to walk in the classroom and have smiles on their faces. And I don't want them looking at the clock during the day, during the hour to see when class is over. I want them to feel comfortable going up to the board. And I just want them to feel comfortable being part of the discussion or coming after school for extra help. I work really hard on building that rapport with my students. And I truly believe once you build that rapport, teaching is easy. So that's my number one goal always when I start a new school year is to work on building the rapport with my students.
Yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. And that's what's lacking in the education systems all around the globe, essentially, because there is no emphasis on education, because education seems to be something that you should strive for, but it can't be just a factory. It can't be a factory attitude towards teaching and education, because I became a teacher, English teacher and arts teacher. I got my certificates and now I'm starting to work in schools. And
That's awesome.
yeah, thank you. And the high school level, let's say. Um, and it's very challenging and rewarding because I volunteered a lot with in the university to get students who are struggling to get in with math and English, to get them into the universities so they can study the profession that they want to study, to get the degree that they want to do, to accomplish, and to get the job, and to have the life for themselves that they should and deserve to have. So I volunteer there. Um, how do you feel about working in a prison? Does it feel like some kind of a volunteer work? Is it more?
I I think that, a lot of people would ask me, how could you teach in a prison, maximum security, where you have the worst of the worst?
Yes.
First of all, I never, ever went back and looked at what my students did. I could have looked them all up and saw why they were in prison, but I didn't. And most of the students I worked with were lifers. I was more interested in how long they were going to be there, because that told me how much time I had to help them reach their goals. But I never, ever looked at my students as anything other than students. And I think that that was really important. When they walked through door 7 and into my classroom, they became students. And I treated them with the utmost respect, which was expected from the Department of Corrections, to always be fair, firm, and consistent. And I made sure I did so. So I like when I first came here, a lot of my friends would ask me, "Are you crazy to go teach in a maximum security prison?" And I said, listen to the news. How many shootings have you heard of in public school settings? And then think about how many shootings you've heard of in classrooms in a prison. I've never heard of any. I said, I think I'm safer sometimes working in a maximum security prison than in a public school. I can walk outside, there's sharpshooters all around me. You know what I mean? I try to put a different spin on it. But for the 3 years I was there, the school was called the safe zone. That was the one place there were not any fights. And I always treated the men with respect. And I'm not saying there weren't some discipline issues. There were some discipline issues, but it was very minor. The men were actually very, very respectful. And they enjoyed being there. And I'll tell you one story. My first day there, when I first started teaching, the men would just get handed out packets. And they would work on these packets, or they'd sit by some old computers and listen to some music while they worked. And eventually that was turned into a full school where they took classes with me. But anyways, when I started out, it was like that. And there was one other teacher there when I started. And I remember the first day, this guy raised his hand and he needed help with math. And the other teacher was going to help him. I said, let me help him. Math is my specialty. I was excited to be able to help. So I went and sat down next to him, and he removed one of his earphones from his head so he could hear me. And I took his pencil, which is odd for me because when I'm teaching in a high school, I never, ever walk around with a pencil. And the reason being is it's too easy to do the work for the students.
Yes.
but I wanted to do this one problem for him. So I walked him through it and I asked him some questions while I did it. And then when I got done, I said, I want you to do a problem now. And as he did it, I encouraged him and I asked him some few questions and we did some more problems. Eventually he took the other headphone off. And I could tell he was really, really into learning. And when we got done, he looked at me and he said, "You're not scared." He goes, "You're not even nervous." He goes, "Why is that?" And I said, "Because I'm here to help you guys." I said, "I don't care what you did in the past." I said, "You walk through door 7, you're now in this classroom and you're trying to make a better life for yourself. So I'm going to help you get there. It's my job. It's my job to help you see your potential and reach it. I want you to reach your goals. And that's why I'm here." And I could tell the men in the room were listening to that. And words don't mean anything. It's the actions, right? So I had to make sure as I went around along that they saw how much I truly cared and that I was only there to help them reach their goals. And that's what I did.
Wow, that is so interesting. I think to be among the prisoner crowd or the populace or whatever washed up word we can use, um, it is a stressful. I think it is. It's also challenging, but it's very similar to a school actually.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
not.
You know
It's
where
not.
it's diff. You know where it's different when the men started passing tests. Because like I had told you before we started, some men had been in school for 10 years and hadn't passed a test. And once we started having real classes and working together,
Yes.
when the men would pass a test, they would cry. And I thought that was really interesting because a lot of these men in prison are part of gangs and that, and they've got that tough attitude. But when they actually passed the test and did something positive for themselves, they couldn't believe they succeeded and they would cry. And I didn't just teach subject area. I wanted the men to learn about teamwork and accountability, just like I do in high school. So I would have an orientation. Once I had the school set up so that it was a real traditional school, I had orientations every 3 months, and the men would go through an orientation. And one of the first things I would tell them is, if you're serious about being in school, then it doesn't matter where I seat you. I said, there will be a seating chart. And of course, I purposely put people that wouldn't associate together outside of
Yes.
school together. And watching them start out so far apart, I needed to bring them together, and I used their strengths to do that. So if one student I noticed was doing well in math, I would say, I need to go help these guys. Could you just help your partner here get through this problem while I go and help somebody else? And I kind of watched through the corner of my eye to see if he was helping. If I need to go back, I'd go back. But and then with the other guy, maybe he was good at writing and he would help with the writing. I remember one class, I had a guy that struggled to read. And I had asked him before class, I said, your reading has improved so much. In social studies class today, do you think you could read out loud? And he said, "I'm just not ready." And I said, "Okay, that's fine. When you're ready, maybe you'll do it." Well, we read that day and he actually did raise his hand and he said, "I'll read out loud." But the most interesting part about it was when he read out loud, he stumbled a little bit. And his partner whispered over to him the words that he was stumbling on and helped him.
Mm.
And when he got done reading, all the men in class got up and shook his hand and told him how proud they were of him. They were coming together as a team. And it was just as a teacher to see that, it was just such a huge gift.
So can you tell me a little bit about the classes themselves, how they were conducted? Were there different guidelines or rules that were prior to the class itself? Was it where did it took place exactly?
So when I first got there, the first 3 weeks, like I said, they were handing out the pamphlets, and I had to leave for a month because I had to go to training. I had to learn self-defense. I had to learn about gang stuff. I had to learn about contraband.
Wow.
I had to learn how to shackle people. I had to learn how to shake down a cell. I mean, I had to go through all of that.
Damn.
Because you never know if I'm in a classroom and an officer gets taken down, I'm the only one there.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to be able to defend myself and help that person.
That's
So I had to go
crazy.
through
Yeah.
all the same training as everybody else. Anyways, while I was at my training, I spent my evenings, because we also had to test every week. We had to pass, I think it was like 100 question test. So I would study every evening. And when I wasn't studying for that, I was making up my orientation and designing my school, because I knew when I got back, there was the other teacher was only going to be there for a short period, and then it was going to be me. But when I came back, there was, when you walked into the classroom, there was nothing really on the walls except for a couple posters. And there are a few books in the room, and there was a poetry book. There was no whiteboard or anything for me to teach math with. But the men found a little old whiteboard in a closet. We took it out, and we put it up against two chairs, and that's how I started teaching.
Oh.
So that's, and I started teaching just a math 1 and a math 2 class, and I put the guys in the class by their testing scores. But then eventually we moved to a different prison. We moved to a brand new prison, and there was a real classroom with, a whiteboard, and, I had everything I needed, the technology I needed for the class. So when I came back with our first orientation, I told them that we were going to start with a math class, math 1, math 2, and writing class. And then I also offered labs. And I had tutors. So I had 2 offender tutors that would help out. And when we weren't, like, if I was having math class and my math tutor, I had a tutor for math class, he would be in class with me, but when he wasn't in class, he was over in lab working with the kids on math. So I had math labs going, and I had, or not kids, adults. When I had math class going, or when I had writing class going, he would be in the lab working with kids, or not kids, I keep saying kids because I'm a high school teacher, the adult offenders on the mathematics. And the other tutor would be working with me on writing. And when there wasn't writing class, he would be in the labs working on that. But it was really interesting because I made it very clear to the men that if they were going to come to school, they needed to do the work. And I remember my first math class, I gave an assignment. 3 guys came back the next day without it done, and I sent them back to their cells. I said, you're not going to hold up the rest of the class. I only gave you a little bit of an assignment. I just expected you to try it. You didn't do any of it. And all the way I could hear them down the hall cussing, and they're all upset because I made them go back. Well, I give them 3 strikes, and you're out. So the next day they came back, 2 of the guys had the work done. The other man didn't. So I called them out in the hall and I said, maybe this just isn't the time for you. Maybe you need to go to school at another time. I said, but this isn't going to fly. I said, you're a team in the classroom now. If you like it or not, you're part of a team, and this team works together and moves up together. You're not going to be moving up with them if you're not going to do the work. He came back the 3rd day, and he never missed an assignment after that. They were testing me. And I think the other men really appreciated that I stuck to my guns, and I did not just let them come to class. And it was just, there are little moments like that. I remember teaching writing class, and one of the guys looked at me, he goes, Miss Beth, he goes, when you teach math, you just light up. But when you teach writing, you don't get so excited. And that bothered me. That was, I went home and I thought, I got to fix that. That is not acceptable.
Yeah.
So I remember walking the track, and I walked the tracks for hours thinking, how am I going to make them excited about this? So I started teaching DOLs and that, where they'd have to go to the board and they have to do those corrections. I think that's what they call it. Anyways, I remember the first time I did that, I gave the guys a sentence, and I said, now you guys, you need to correct it. Look it over with your partner, and I'm going to send you up to the board, and we're going to do the corrections. Well, when it was time to go to the board, nobody wanted to go to the board. And I said, you have a partner, you don't have to go by yourself. And they still didn't want to go to the board. So I said, okay, so I'll go to the board today. So the next day they come back to class, and I had 12 guys in class. That was the most I could have. So I had 6 groups, and I gave them all a different sentence to correct. And I said, don't put your names on this. So they corrected it. And then I collected them and I gave them a different one. I said, see if there's anything you want to correct on this one now. I did that 3 times. And then I said, listen, who wants to go to the board now? And nobody raised their hand. But I said, you don't even have your own paper. So if you're going to the board and you make a mistake, it's somebody else's mistake. The light bulb went on, and they were so excited to go to the board. And from that point on, they didn't even care anymore if they were making a mistake or not. They just thought it was so much fun. and they would be standing up excited to say, that's right or that's wrong, or try this, I think this is right. And they can't, it was just watching them come together as a group. And until they told me as a group they were ready for me to say yes or no, they were correct on their sentence corrections, I would just sit there and let them work together. And it was just really cool.
Oh, that's amazing that you had to go through a boot camp and training and courses to just to teach. And I understand it's a prison, but teaching is it's actually not that hard, I think. And the practical side of teaching, the logistical side, let's say, it is a easy peasy, let's say, but and the human connection and the environment and the stress and all the anxiety that is going on in the classroom, that's the hard part. Actually, people don't know that. So how do you sum up the experience after having gone all through the training camp and moving from Chicago to Iowa, um, and trying to get used to a new life, and now you're in a prison with a bunch of offenders. Um, how do you call it? Incarcerated? Yeah, incarceration in a correctional facility, all those washed up terms. But how do you sum up the experience? What was it like?
This First of all, I'm back in public schools now. So in 2017, I left the prison system and went back to teaching in the high school. But one thing I learned quickly, most of the men that I worked with are never getting out of prison. And people would say, why even bother educating them? Because many of these men could now read a newspaper. They could read a book. They had stuff to do. They could also help others that were in school. So it gave them value. And I think that was really important for somebody that had a life sentence to have something to do while they're in there. Also, I struggle with the fact that we send people to prison. We teach them how um, to be part of a team. We teach them how to hold a job and to be accountable and to get an education. And most of them are never getting out. And I've never been a victim. I don't want to downplay that because I don't know how that feels. But I saw the transformation with some of these men. And I think given a second chance, some of them that walked through those steel doors for the first time would not be the same person walking out. But obviously, that's not my decision. That's the judicial system's decision of when and whether or not they get out. But it impacted me enough that I wrote the book Seven Doors In. And this book walks you in through the seven steel doors that I walked in every day, and has you take a seat in the classroom, and you get to hear about a lot of the stories and the transformations that happened in the classroom. And I think it's important for people to see that. And I think it's also important to note that, again, I was never a victim. I didn't know anybody in prison. So it's not like I wrote this book because I wanted to do it for a family member or someone like that that's serving time, because I don't know anybody that was. I just know what I saw and what I learned behind door 7, and I wanted to share it with the world. And actually, it has been optioned by a film director by the name of Terrence Gordon, to be made into a feature film.
Wow.
Yes,
Wow.
so it's going to be in the feature film will be inspired by the book, which will give them a little bit of creativity. Yes.
Wow, congratulations.
So very exciting times coming up. The screenplay is being written right now. And I just signed a contract with a production company to move forward. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Wow, that is awesome.
Yes.
I'm so excited for you, and I'm excited to see the finished movie, of course, when it comes out.
Thank you. I appreciate the support.
Yeah. This was a lovely conversation. You are a great person because you have, I think, the ethical attitude to when it comes to teaching, and the attitude says, or the mantra or whatever, it says that you should be completely objective, scientific. You have to do the work, but you you have to not let your emotions get the better of you when you do the
Yes.
work.
And
That's the key. Yeah.
I think it's important as teachers that when we walk in that classroom that we don't judge the students. I mean, I never ask teachers, what did you think of the student from the year before? Because I want to make my own impression of that student. I want to see how that student does in my classroom. You know, I'll have students ask me, have you had my brother or sister before? Yes or no, but that doesn't have anything to do with who you are as a person. I would always make that clear to my students. I think it's really important that we not judge, that we take a look at who's before us and help them to reach their goals and just look forward.
Yeah. I want to thank you so much. This was a great conversation, and I think we have a we have a nice opening for future conversations.
That would be awesome.
And
I'd love that. I'd love that.
to interview you after the movie comes out, and we can talk
Awesome. I'd be
about
happy to.
it.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Beth, and
All right.
thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you. We'll see you
All
when
right.
we see you. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Guy.
Thank you.